Hi, welcome to Our Special Lives. I'm Laura McGrath, and today we are talking about how to change a trach or a tracheostomy tube. Now, obviously, if you're the parent of a child with a trach, you know how to change a trach. I made this video because there might be some parents who are considering getting a trach for their child and just want to learn more about the care that's involved. And I also wanted to make a video in case parents of children with a trach were trying to train caregivers or family members and wanted a video that could kind of show them some of the ins and outs and tips and tricks involved in changing a trach. I'm going to show a video of actually changing a trach in a little bit, but before we do that, I wanted to go through a few things to keep in mind as you're changing a trach. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is there is a little bit of a mindset that you need to have when you change a trach. If somebody has never changed a trach before, in fact, many of our nurses even had not changed a trach since they had done their clinicals in nursing school. So if it's been a while since you've changed a trach, or maybe you've never changed a trach before, it can be a little scary and intimidating because you're basically removing something that gives the child an airway, and then you're trying to get a new something that recreates the airway. And so that transition between taking out the old trach and putting in the new trach can be a little bit scary. It's really important to try to remember that it's going to be okay, and the best thing you can do is remain calm. When people start getting nervous, their hands start shaking, their minds start racing, and they're not really focused on what's happening. So in the video, I'm going to give a few pointers for how to make this process go a little bit more smoothly. I also want to point out that if you think about it, every day there are thousands of parents and non-medical personnel who are changing trachs of people who require them. And so this is just like anything else, a learned skill. It's something that you can do and you will figure out how to do it. For the purposes of this video, I'm talking about a standard cuffless trach. There are things called cuff trachs that a lot of kids with ventilators and BiPAPs use, and that's a little beyond the scope of this video. So I'm just teaching how to change a cuffless trach. But I still feel like if your child uses a cuff trach, you could still get something out of this video, because actually changing the trach is somewhat similar. So the first thing I want to talk about is what you'll need to change the trach. And the first thing that you need, obviously, is the trach itself. So usually the trachs come in a little box like this. Okay, you can see this is a Shiley. This is my son's trach. My son actually has a custom trach, a custom length. And that's something that I wanted to bring up because the standard length on the trach was too short for him. And he could very easily get his finger under it and pull it out. We were having a lot of trouble with the trach coming out. Sometimes if he even coughed significantly, the trach would come out. So we actually ended up working with the pulmonologist. They measured the length of his trachea through a sedated procedure, and we were actually able to get a longer custom trach for him that works a little bit better. So if you're having trouble with your child's trach coming out when you don't want it to, just let me know in the comments, and I'm happy to walk through what we did to get our custom trach. But anyway, this is what a standard trach looks like. I don't know if you can see that. That's the packaging. And when you open it up, there's two parts. There's the trach itself. And you'll see there's a little hole right here. And here's the stem. This is what this part is what goes into your child's trachea, and this is the part that's on the exterior of your child's neck. And then this is called an obturator. You put the obturator inside the trach, and what it does is it stiffens this little stem so that it's much easier to place the trach into the trachea. The next thing that you'll need are called trach ties. So these are trach ties, and they're made of kind of a polyester, kind of spongy material, which is kind of nice because they don't really absorb water that well. They do need to be changed out about once a day, and they're nice and cushioned. So one of my little tips for changing a trach is that I like to preload one side of the trach with the trach tie. So I'm just going to feed the tie through there, and these have Velcro closures on the side. So basically what this will do is when I place the trach in my son, I only have to wrap it around one side and get it in the other hole around his neck. I don't have to do both of them. So it kind of saves me a step and makes it quicker to make sure that trach's not going to fall back out. The next thing that I always have handy is split gauze. And split gauze is just like a piece of gauze, but it has a slit on one side. And so basically this sits under the trach on the outside of the throat, and it kind of cushions the skin and absorbs any secretions or fluids that might be collecting at the junction where the trach meets the skin. One tip that we use for my son, he tends to pull his out a lot. So we actually flip the split gauze over so that the split is facing down. That's a lot harder to become dislodged. And so we do that a lot. So instead of putting it up, we put it down. And then the last thing that I feel like is really important is we have little packets of water-based lubricant jelly that we get on Amazon. I'll put a link below. I think McKesson makes about 150 for like $12. Or you may be able to get them from your medical supply company. And this is really helpful to have anywhere you might be changing a trach. So we have these little trach kits that we make up, and we have one on my son's wheelchair, and we have one in the car and in various locations in the house in case we need to change a trach on an emergency basis. And we always have packets of this in there. I feel like the number one thing that makes it somewhat hard to change a trach is that sometimes there's resistance when you go to put the new trach into the stoma site. And 99% of the time, the reason why that is because there's friction between the stem of the trach and the skin around the stoma site. There's just some friction there because it's dry. And so putting a little bit of Surgilube on the interior tip of the trach that's going into the trachea will help tremendously with that. Now, when we use this, we're dabbing around that tip. You don't want to glop it on because whatever you put on the tip of that is going to end up in your child's trachea. So those are just a few tips and tricks. That's the equipment you'll need. And now we're going to cut over to the video of actually changing the trach. So one thing I also want to say is that if your child has a trach, your doctor is going to give you instructions on how to change the trach, and you should always follow your doctor's instructions. I'm obviously not a doctor. I'm not trying to give you medical advice. So if your doctor's told you something different than what I'm saying or what I'm showing you, obviously follow what your doctor has done. The other thing is that when a child first gets a trach, there are very specific instructions that go with changing trachs because the stoma site is new and that incision is new. So always make sure to follow your doctor's instructions when you're dealing with a brand new trach. So now we're going to move on to the part of the video where we actually see how a trach is changed. And I'm going to continue to give you a few little tips as we move along through that video. So I'm removing the split gauze from my son's trach, and I'm undoing one side of the trach ties and pulling it from back around his neck.
I have the new trach with the trach tie attached to one side, and I'm inserting the obturator to stiffen up the stem. Then I take some water-based lubricant and I dab it along the bottom of the trach stem. I'm kind of using my finger to rub a little bit at the bottom and then wiping off the excess. Now the trach is ready to insert. I quickly pull out the old trach, and you can see that the stoma is slightly opening and closing when he inhales and exhales. You want to try to insert the trach on an exhale because the stoma is going to be a little bit wider. You very quickly insert it and pull out the obturator. Then you pull the trach tie through and insert on the other side. You can see in this video that the tab of the trach tie got stuck to the side. That happens, and you just simply undo it and pull it through again. And then fasten the trach tie on the other side. It's very important that the trach ties are not too tight. You should be able to insert at least a finger easily on each side. And you may have to adjust the tabs if it's a little too tight or a little too loose, like I just did. Lastly, you want to take some split gauze and insert it underneath the tabs of the trach, like so.
So that's it. I hope this video was helpful. Please leave a comment or ask a question below. Thanks so much for watching.